Good day, everyone. Welcome to another Live with Kevin for what will eventually become an episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. I am so glad that you're here. If you're here with us live and not watching later, I hope you'll say hello and tell us where you're from in the comments in whatever social channel you're in. I'd love to know that. It'd be great to know where people are located. And so while you're here, whether you choose to comment right now or not, what I want you to do is imagine that you're joining Shanna and I, and I'll introduce Shanna to you in a minute, that you're joining the two of us for a cup of coffee or a glass of water or whatever. And if we were sitting around the table, if you had a question, you'd ask it. If you had a comment, you'd share it. If you had an idea, you'd share it as well. And so I hope that you will do exactly that, because if you do that, not only will it give some guidance to me as I'm leading the conversation with Shanna, but it will also make for a better conversation, eventually a better podcast, and perhaps be of more value to you in this moment, which is what I hope that it will be. So if you've not been with me before and you didn't know, you can look in the top corner above my shoulder and see that, yes, this will eventually be a podcast. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to, everything I've just said won't be on that podcast. Wouldn't make sense for it to be, would it? So what I'm going to do now is do a countdown, which is where we will trim the audio and the video for the podcast, and we'll get started. But continue to share your comments. I see some there. I'll get to them in a few minutes. Continue to share your hellos, your locations, and your comments as we go. And with that, Marissa, we're going to do a countdown in 3, 2, 1. We can look at the leadership landscape and not always see the same gender balance that we see in the individual contributor ranks. We've shared other conversations here about changing the bias and changing female representation in the leadership ranks generally. But today we're talking about meaningful actions women can take to reach their potential in their career and in their leadership roles as well. But don't worry, if you're a man, don't leave, because I promise there's plenty here for you as well. Welcome to another episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast, where we are helping leaders grow personally and professionally to lead more effectively and make a bigger difference for their teams, organizations, and the world. If you're listening to this podcast, you could be with us live in the future on your favorite social media channel. You can get access to that information and the schedule for when those are happening by joining our Facebook or LinkedIn groups. And if you did that, you would have heard this conversation just about 2 months sooner, which might have been a great advantage to you. So you can join our Facebook or LinkedIn groups. Go to remarkablepodcast.com/Facebook or remarkablepodcast.com/LinkedIn to do that. I hope you will. And today's episode is brought to you by our latest book, The Long Distance Team, Designing a Team for Everyone's Success. You can learn more about that by going to longdistanceteambook.com, where you can learn more, get links to order a copy, and also get a free excerpt as well. I hope you'll do that. And with that, I'm going to bring in my guest. Here she is. And Shanna, before I introduce you, I'll just tell you there's a whole bunch of comments over here that I'll get to in a second for those who are with us live. Let me introduce Shanna Hocking to you. She is a leadership consultant, philanthropist, strategist, author, and speaker with 20 years of experience in raising hundreds of millions of dollars and leading large teams at organizations such as the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania, Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, the University of Alabama, and Duke University. Her clients include universities, not surprisingly, not-for-profits, global businesses, and family foundations. She's the author of this book, One Bold Move a Day, meaningful actions women can take to fulfill their leadership and career potential. Her expertise has been featured all over, from the Wall Street Journal and Bloomberg and Business Week to Harper's Bazaar, Today.com. She's had articles published in the Harvard Business Review and Fortune. We could go on. She's been on television. Today, she's my guest. Shanna, thanks for being here.
Kevin, I'm very glad to join you. Thank you.
So, okay, philanthropist, fundraiser extraordinaire, and yet you've written a book that's not about that. You've written a book about making bold moves for all of us, both men and women. And so my question would be, what led you to focus on this work?
Well, I found my career when I was 18 years old, which is pretty unusual for people to find a career so early in their lives. And my dream career happened to be fundraising. And though I spent 20 years working my way up to the corner office in the nonprofit space, I worked with CEOs, C-suite leaders, global business leaders who were giving their money to the organizations I worked for, and working in very complex organizations myself. And through those experiences as a working woman, as a leader, I found the need for another book on the bookshelf that would help create a roadmap for people to advance their careers, develop as a leader, and grow as a person. And that is what ultimately led me to write One Bold Move a Day.
There you go. And for those of you who are listening later, we've got people with us today from Saudi Arabia and Chicago and New York and San Francisco and Nashville and Egypt and Ethiopia and all over. And so what a great chance for us to share some of these ideas, Shanna, with everybody, both now and into the future. It's one of the great things about this particular medium. So you've sort of told us what led you to this work and sort of what your goal is here, which is fantastic. And the book, is framed around these several actions that we can take, that women, I'm going to say we, but that women, any of us can take to help us move forward in our careers. And it's solid and great advice. And we'll get to all that. But I actually believe that the first chapter might be the most important, where you talk about 4 mindsets. And so I'd like, if you don't mind, for us to dive into each of those 4 mindsets a little bit first, because it's long been my belief that without the right mindset, we'll never work to develop the skill set or ultimately the habit set that it takes for us to do the stuff that you're suggesting to us later. If we don't get the first part right, the rest will be intellectually interesting, but never will an action be taken. So let's talk about, talk about those mindsets? Is that okay?
Yes, please.
So the first one, and you admitted in the book that this first one was sort of hard for you. Again, it was kind of intellectually okay, but you didn't really act on it at one point in your career or life. So let's talk about that first one, which is the gratitude mindset. What do you mean? How do we exercise it, etc.?
So the gratitude mindset took a lot of practice for me, just like you said. It was the experience of being present in the moment and honoring all you have and all you are. When we think about gratitude, we often get caught up in thinking about the really big picture things. I'm grateful to be healthy. I'm grateful for my family. And certainly those are things to be grateful for. What was missing for me was the reminder to be grateful for things that happened that day. And what I wanted to try to understand was how pursuing and practicing gratitude could help me in my career. I was going through a significant reorg at the time. The last thing I was feeling, honestly, was grateful. And pursuing this gratitude practice helped to keep me present in the moment, to remind me of the journey I had been on, to celebrate that progress, and to be grateful for the things that I was experiencing and feeling and doing.
So I'm going to talk about them not in the order they are in the book, because something you just said, I was already thinking it, but then you said it as well, is a connection to the gratitude mindset is what you have as the fourth one, which is the progress mindset. So, because you said, hey, it helped me stay aware of progress we were making, even though things were really hard. So talk about the progress mindset and beyond, and when times are hard.
So, the progress mindset is a reminder that there is so much that you have already done, you have already learned. And instead of getting to the next thing on your to do list or the next accomplishment that you want to have, to say, look what I have done. How can I celebrate this? How can I honor myself? This is so important for us to do, whether we're leading ourselves or leading others, to celebrate and honor progress. And so you're right, Kevin, that all of these mindsets are intricately tied to each other. They are individually stand, but they are complementary. And together, these 4 mindsets make the bold move mindset.
There you go. And so, I like it, the bold move mindset. So we'll get to the other 2, but I want to make another comment about the progress one. And that is that it's so useful that you said, when we look back, we can see that we've made progress, but sometimes in the moment, it's hard for us to see it. Talk a little bit about how you went about writing the book, because I think there's a lesson about that mindset in the process that you used to write the book.
So for me, when I was setting out to write this book, I gave myself space in different capacities to try to write it. I actually started the very first words on the page when we were on vacation in my very happiest place. I highly recommend being in a place that you love. It helps you feel differently about the world when you are working on a project. And I was, with loved ones in a happy place. And that doesn't mean it all flowed out and came really easily. There were times where I would get stuck and look at a blank page. And instead of thinking, oh, I have 75,000 words to write and I've only written X, it was really about, look how far I've come today. What can I do to even get even farther? How can I recognize this? And then I tried writing in lots of different ways. For the times where I got the most stuck, I went out on a walk. I took my phone with me. I pulled out the notes app, talked to Siri, and delivered the content that way so that when I got back to my desk, I would email it to myself. And instead of looking at a blank page, I was able to say, look how much you've already done, even while you were out on a walk.
And now I'm editing and not writing from a blank sheet of paper.
Exactly.
2 more mindsets before we go forward. And one of those is the happiness mindset. You just mentioned how much environment can matter to you when we're doing something creative, we're doing something important, project work and that kind of thing. Where does the happiness mindset fit in?
For so much of my career, I kept believing that when I reached a goal, then I could be happy. And I think this is very common for ambitious type A leaders who want to do so many things. They want to learn and accomplish so many things. And they keep unintentionally delaying joy. And the truth is that when we find and create happiness for ourselves, that is where success is. We are more likely to be successful. And we don't have to do this alone. Pursuing happiness is something that I believe that joy belongs at work. I believe that joy comes from learning and working with others and collaborating with others and sharing our goals and sharing our failures and sharing our growth. And that is what happiness looks like, instead of some gold trophy that we keep imagining to be at the top of this mountain that we are all climbing.
Claire has on LinkedIn has asked a question and shared a struggle. I'm going to share a bit of it in a second here. But I would say this to everybody. Like, if you get nothing else from this other than the comment that Shanna just made about don't delay joy, like that's worth all your time here, everybody. So Claire shared a question. She's in a job search and she said it's hard to find gratitude. She's been looking for work for 6 months. She's a woman in a male-dominated industry. I find that an obstacle, and it shouldn't be. I bet the book is great, but the reality is I just need to find some new ways to network beyond and besides LinkedIn. So I'm just curious if you have a comment for Claire specifically, since she's here in part because of that situation.
Yes.
And there are others who are listening that are there or have been there. Any comments?
Yeah. First, Claire, I want to honor that I'm sorry that this is happening to you. It is really difficult to be in a job search, particularly one that extends over time. I do tell the story in the book about the 2 times that I was unemployed during my career. On pursuit to my dream career, with all the experience that I had, I still had a hard time getting a job. And I was the primary breadwinner in my family. And so for me, these are things that I have actually lived in my career. And I don't want to say that they're going to immediately apply to everyone, but they are things that I applied for myself when I was in this situation. In terms of tactical things to think about beyond LinkedIn networking, yes, you're right. LinkedIn is fantastic and can only do so much. So I was a big believer in showing up to as many of those free or low cost networking events that I could find in my community. The chamber where I lived hosted a lot. Professional industry associations often host those. It's not my favorite thing to do, to show up without knowing anyone and feeling nervous to say, I don't have a job right now. But instead of saying that, what I practice saying is, I'm really looking for an opportunity to do X. People want to help you, but they need to know how to help you.
Exactly.
So showing up in those rooms in person, not just with the virtual opportunities, is a great way to expand your network. Informational interviewing is the exercise of reaching out to someone in an industry you think you might want to be in, or in a role you might want to be in, and asking them for 15 minutes of their time to learn more about their daily life, what their work is like, what their role is like, how they got there. Claire, I hope those are 2 things that you can use. And I encourage you to reach out to me on that list too, if you'd like some more tactical support in those next steps.
And Claire, that might be your one bold move today, as it turns out. I will say too that I can't get to it as we're having this conversation, but there have been episodes that we've had on the Remarkable Leadership podcast in the past about networking that you might find. And obviously, there's lots of resources.
Great.
We did one, and we'll put it in the show notes later. But about networking for people that hate networking, or something like that was the title of the book and the title of the show. So we have one more mindset, and I think actually it connects to what you were just talking about, and it is called the and mindset. And I love it. So tell me what you mean by the and mindset.
The and mindset for me formed during the pandemic. We were going through one of the most difficult times in our lives. And still on some days, we would have laughs with colleagues, or we would connect with family and loved ones via FaceTime. And we didn't spend as much time pre-pandemic doing those things that were important to us. And what I heard people saying was that they felt guilty to be having joy when the world was deep suffering. And the and mindset is a reminder that two seemingly competing truths can be held at the same time. You can find joy even in challenge. You can be ambitious and grateful. You can have all of the opportunities ahead of you and love what you are doing and still be exhausted from the work that you do. And when we stop trying to have these things be one or the other, either or as a zero-sum game, we allow them to live together. That's where we can find peace and growth.
And I think based on the conversation we were just having, that's useful in that conversation as well. Like, we can be struggling in one part of our life and not keep us from seeing something else in other parts of our lives, right?
Yes.
So the book then follows a series of ideas, the bold moves, if you will, but it starts with that mindset. We've been talking about the mindset, and you've been very practical about ways to apply that and find those mindsets for ourselves as we go, which is fantastic. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pick a couple of these, and you and I can riff on them for a few minutes if you're okay with that. You mentioned in the book that for a time in your life, you really wanted to be a cheerleader, and that didn't happen. And then later in life, you realized that you were a cheerleader. Now, the reason I bring this up is because that while it doesn't have to be a gender thing, oftentimes people think of cheerleaders as being females, and you're saying, man, we can be cheerleaders without pom-poms, I guess. And so what do you mean by that? Let's talk about that, and how that applies to our work and our careers, male or female.
That's right. So the idea of being a cheerleader at work means that you are cheering on others' success. That goes back to, this is not a zero-sum game. There's not only one winner. And that we thrive at work when we are supporting our colleagues, when we are saying, great job on that presentation today. Hey, I think this file or this article might help you with the work that you're doing. When we welcome and onboarding new team members. When we cheer on women at work who are returning from parental leave, or dads who are returning from parental leave, when we're saying, how can I help acclimate you? You've been gone for a little while. I want to tell you some of the things that have happened. So there's lots of different actionable examples in the book about cheering on others at work. And I think this is important for us as bosses too, to really celebrate our team members' accomplishments, to help them feel valued and recognized when they are doing things well, and how to give that feedback to them. But again, it goes back to this idea that joy belongs at work, and that when we say, I believe in you, I am cheering you on, we are supporting other people's joy and productivity and success at work too.
Yeah, 100%. And one of the things I love about that, first of all, it's profoundly true. And secondly, we often think, man, I wish I had a boss that was encouraging. Man, I wish I had a boss who was a cheerleader for me, which is fair. Like, no problem with that. But what you're saying is, you don't have to be the boss to be doing that. You can do that in any direction, sideways with your peers, with your team, if you happen to be in a leadership role. But if you're not in a leadership role, it doesn't change the fact that this is a useful approach for us to grow.
Certainly. The very first time that I can remember cheering on others at work, I was in my first big university fundraising job. Everybody had been hired into new roles. We were starting to learn how to work together. And I genuinely enjoyed my colleagues and I genuinely enjoyed being together. And I noticed that there was a way to celebrate the small things. And it started with birthdays. So I collected everybody's birthdays on a sheet, and I would bring in treats on the day of their birthday to celebrate them at a team meeting. And I was dubbed the birthday fairy in that job, and I loved that because what it meant to me was that I didn't have to. Be their boss or be in a position of authority in order to create these genuine connections at work, and by honoring who people are, not just what they do. And so it is true that you can lead in any direction from wherever you are and celebrate and support your colleagues.
So, in fact, leading from where you are is another one of the chapters in the book, which I don't know that we'll get to any more than what we just said. I want to, there's a chapter and there's an idea that you talk about, which I think at some level, any book on career advice, career advancement, this is going to get said, right? But I want you to share what is the unique piece of this that you think we need to hear. And that is, most anyone's going to say, well, if you want to grow your career, you need to invest in yourself. What specifically do you mean here that maybe is different than what people might have heard or have thought about before?
Well, I do think investing in yourself is important. So if we're all saying it, that's a sign, because the truth is that not enough of us are investing in
Well,
ourselves.
yeah, that's right. I'm not saying it's not being said.
But we still have
It
work
is
to
being
do,
said.
right?
It's just not being acted on, right?
That's
Exactly.
right. And it's because we often put ourselves last. We have so many things that we have to do that I feel like all of us have to keep reminding each other to invest in ourselves. And the way that I talk about it is what I call bold move performance patterns. And they are distinct ways that you can go about investing in yourself. And one of the first ones that I talk about, because I feel like it's really accessible, is learning and reading. And for me, I really enjoy reading articles and books. It's how I found mentors that I didn't even know to guide me in my career. And so whether for someone it's reading those books too, or those articles, or listening to your podcast like this, Kevin, you're providing an opportunity in 30 minutes or less for people to invest in themselves. Other bold move performance patterns are, finding a hobby that's meaningful for you. Rest, because rest is productive. And when we rest and we do it in thoughtful ways, we get our energy to keep going for the long term.
Okay, time out. What do you mean by resting in a thoughtful way?
Right. So I described two different strategies that you can use in the book about how to rest thoughtfully and clearly. Because if we just say we're going to rest, that's fine. But are we resting for a day? Are we resting for a week? Are we resting by not checking any emails, or are we resting by not doing any work? The clearer we can be in what it means to us to rest, the clearer we can do those things
And
to
you're not
rest.
let me be clear. You're not suggesting that any one of those is the right answer. You're saying whatever your answer is, be clear about what it is. Otherwise, you may not have really rested at all.
That's
Fair?
exactly right. That's exactly right. And find a partner who can hold you accountable. You're getting ready to go on vacation this summer, you're taking a week, then say, hey, Kevin, I'm looking for you to be an accountability partner. My rest for this week is to check no email at all. I will not be available via phone or email. And at the end of the week, I'm going to check in with you and let you know how I did, because now I upped my game by having you as my partner. I'm now beholden to myself and to you. And I'm probably going to be more likely to uphold my promise and commitment to you than I might even do for myself.
And if I start getting emails from you, I'll know you failed. That would be
That's
another
right.
issue, right? I know I said I wasn't going to send emails, but we need to stop that. Okay. So you well, maybe it's kind of like the mindset piece. We probably need to talk about this one as well. And again, often stated, sometimes hard to do, and that is believing in ourselves. So, Shauna? What are a couple of things that you would suggest we can do to help amp up our belief in ourselves?
I think that one of the first things that we can do is to give ourselves a mantra to rely on when we're feeling uncertain. Everybody has moments where they feel uncertain. Even when you get to that corner office, that VP role, there are times where you think, do I belong here? Should I be sharing this idea in this room? And so for me, the mantra that I have relied on frequently is I will accomplish more than I ever thought possible. Another great mantra could be, I'm going to make my one bold move today. And these are things that you can rely on and keep practicing on the days where you are feeling confident so that you can come back to them on those days where you feel less confident. Believing in yourself is also reminding yourself that you belong in that room. Somebody hired you for a reason. The voice, the ideas that you share matter. Even if you're not sure in that moment, somebody else said, yes, I want Kevin in this room. I want
Yeah.
Shanna in this room. And so you
Yeah.
need to follow through on that. And by sharing your ideas, you are going to find ways to be more likely to believe in yourself because you're going to get the reactions that you're looking for. You're going to feel more confident. You're going to feel more joy by saying, my ideas can add value to this organization and help me grow.
Yeah, for sure. And I want to make a connection, Shauna, back to something that we talked about earlier, which was being a cheerleader for others. When we are encouraging others, we're actually planting seeds of their belief in themselves. So recognize too that as we do that for others, we're helping them build that in themselves as well.
Love that. Thank you.
So if I'm a leader, and I'll go back and you said from the start, and I mentioned from the very start that we were going to talk about this as it related to women, but it certainly all applies regardless of whether we're men or women. But I want to go back to the woman piece for a sec. So if I'm a leader, I'm a male or female leader, what can I specifically do to help uh, the females, the women on my team? Do you have anything specific that you would want leaders to be thinking about in terms of helping their female employees make those bold moves?
Absolutely. Well, I will tell you about a research study that I just read a few weeks ago that is living in my brain, and I can't stop thinking about it. And it relates to what we're talking about. The research was cited in the MIT Sloan Management Review, and it said that men and women are equally as likely to offer social support at work, which to me is part of leading from where you are. So that's great news. But that men may be more rewarded for offering that social support in the workplace than women are. And women are offering more social support. So, this is important for us as leaders to be thinking about this. If we're looking to create intentional cultures where everyone is supporting everyone else, and we are unintentionally rewarding men for doing that more than women, then we need to be aware of this first so that we can be aware of this bias. We need to clarify for our team members what it looks like to be supportive in the workplace in a way that will be valued and recognized. We can think about including this in our annual performance reviews to show that we are valuing this as much as any financial or other, metric-based outcome. And then we need to train for this in the workplace so that we're not just expecting something out of our team members, but we're not giving them the resources to be successful. And
Right.
this is important for men and women. And so this study to me is really it's it's going to hold women back from advancing in their careers. And so for all of us to be aware as leaders that we can do these clear steps to better support women in particular in the workplace, which will help everyone thrive at work. That's the example I want to share with your audience right now.
Perfect. So before I shift gears to the final segment of this conversation, Shauna, is there anything I didn't ask that you wish I would have?
Well, you've asked terrific questions. One thing I do want to clarify for the listeners as we're talking about bold moves is the way that I define bold moves. Because oftentimes you hear bold move and you think a billboard on the side of a highway or an all caps text to a friend. And if
Or
you're going to
being
make one
brash or
bold move,
something, right?
right, right, because bold can sometimes have like negative connotations. So it's important for me to define that a bold move is a meaningful action that helps you move forward, learn, and grow. And in that capacity, you can see how it's possible to make one bold move a day to advance your career, develop as a leader, and grow as a person.
All right. Shanna Hocking, we are talking with her about her new book, One Bold Move a Day, obviously. And we'll give you how to get a hold of that and all that stuff before we're done. But I have a couple other questions before we get there. You mentioned earlier that you are a lover of reading, as am I. So my question for you is, what are you reading these days?
Well, I can have a hot off the press recommendation for you for a
Okay.
book, Time Management Essentials by my friend Anna Dearman Cornick, also a McGraw-Hill author. How many times are we thinking, I don't have enough time in the day to do all these wonderful things that I want to learn and accomplish? Anna's got all the tips for you in a really easy to digest and read way, and apply that in your daily life.
There you go. Time Management Essentials, right? And Anna's last name again is
Cornick, Kornick.
Kornick. We will have that in the show notes for all of you on the podcast. But if you're live, you won't get that right away. So what do you do for fun, Shauna?
Well, I love to cook and entertain for my family and for friends and loved ones. Live music is my other happy place besides the vacation I told you about. So this weekend, my husband and I went to concerts. We've got more concerts planned for this summer. I'm so glad to be able to be back to live music, and I do a lot of reading. And so, though it is sometimes for work related purposes, I'm always enjoying different recommendations for articles and books.
I have never been to a concert and watched someone read, but I have been at sporting events and people were reading books, and I'm like,
They don't all happen at the same time.
I was at the Rose Bowl and I'm watching the Rose Bowl, and there's this woman reading this book. I'm like, okay, I love to read, but not right now.
Time and place, Kevin.
So
Time and
speaking
place.
of reading, it was asked in the chat. Tell us where we can learn more. Where can we get the book? Where do you want to point people? I'll put that website up here in a second, but where do you want to point people? How can they learn more about you, your work, this book, etc.?
One Bold Move a Day is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, your favorite independent bookstore, and you can find more at oneboldmoveaday.com.
oneboldmoveaday.com, everybody. You can't get any easier than that. Like, you've heard that so many times during the course of this conversation. So now I have a question for all of you who have been watching or listening. And it's a question I ask every single episode. It's one of my favorite questions. So you've been listening to us have a conversation for the last 30 minutes or so. And the question is, now what? What action are you going to take as a result? Is it that you're going to not delay joy, which is one of the things I wrote down, whether it's you thinking about how you're going to practice one of those 4 mindsets or one of the many other practical ideas that we got. It's not my job to tell you what it should be. It's my job to encourage you to think about what it is for you. What is that action that you want to take? Perhaps it's your next bold move today, or it's something else, whether for yourself or as a leader, whatever that is, that's what will make this time worth your time. And I hope that you will take that seriously. Shauna, thanks again so much for being here. It was a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Kevin. To more bold moves together.
There you go, everybody. And while you take your bold move today, make sure to add subscribing to this podcast, connecting with me on LinkedIn, wherever you happen to be listening to this or watching this. There's a way to get connected to it, refer it to others, review it, star it. You know the drill. Do those things so you can be back with us next week for another episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. Thanks, everyone.